India is making its mark and the world is taking note. The latest is Russian President Vladimir Putin speaking at the plenary session of the 19th annual meeting of the Valdai Discussion Club in Moscow. Putin lavished praise on the Indian Premier, talking about how Modi's Make in India initiative, style of independent diplomacy and the future all belong to India.
India has made a tremendous progress in development from being a British colony to its modern state. Almost 1.5 billion people, tangible development results that gives reasons to everyone's respect and admiration for India. A lot has been done in the past years under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. Naturally, he's a patriot of his country. And his idea of Make in India, it matters. Prime Minister Modi is one of those people in the world who is capable of conducting an independent foreign policy in the interests of its nation. Despite any attempts to do some detente or to limit something, he's like an icebreaker moving in the necessary direction for the Indian people. And I'm sure that India has a great future.
Mind you, this at a time when the world is again being forced to take sides. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has only made the situation more acute. But India, all this while, has been steadfast in keeping national interest first, even while decrying violence when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Indian diplomacy has ensured that the country is not bullied into any bloc. This pragmatic Modi diplomacy, coupled with domestic policies for growth like Make in India, have repeatedly gained recognition and have been taken note of worldwide.
He paid wholesome praise to Prime Minister Modi for his leadership of India, for his vision of the development of India through the Make in India program, which he said made eminent economic and spiritual sense. But he also praised India's independent foreign policy under Prime Minister Modi's leadership. This is indeed a proud moment for India, for diplomacy, which has been now given international recognition at the highest level.
We have what he said. There is nothing wrong with that. He has only stated the factual position. We are close friends. We are strategic partners. We are not allies. So when he talks of independence of foreign policy, that is very true. Independence also means that when even a close friend does something which we are not comfortable with, we gently and politely and respectfully point it out.
India's stand, therefore, on the current crisis in Ukraine is very balanced. It is absolutely something which we will not deviate from, keeping in view our past background. So, in this case, therefore, we have not joined the sway which is happening when the European countries and Americans get together and they want to isolate. So what we do is based on principle, and the principle is that there should be no loss of life.
Remember, in the recent past, even in diplomacy, India has strictly adhered to the idea of India first. But the country has also gone beyond the traditional historic groupings and has tried to engage different countries in new formations like the Quad. Its contribution and significance have been noted by practically all world leaders, from Joe Biden to Vladimir Putin to the Australian Prime Minister to Japanese, and now, of course, Putin himself. In fact, remember that earlier Joe Biden had remarked in the Quad that Modi's handling of COVID has shown the world how democracies can deliver. He had contrasted that with how China had completely mishandled the COVID crisis before Biden. Obama wrote in Time magazine about Modi's rags to riches story and how it epitomizes the India dream. At the COP26 summit last year, Boris Johnson said we should unite to tackle climate change, and if there's one guy who knows how to do it, it's the Prime Minister of India. So is the Modi brand of governance and diplomacy now carving out a space for itself, or is this only a carryover of the Nehruvian era, a continuation, as the Congress claims?
Honorable Prime Minister has laid out a vision for technology, and it is very clear that the next decade is India's decade, and it is absolutely clear that India will be amongst the leaders deciding and architecting and shaping the future of technology for the world and the world's consumers.
रूस के राष्ट्रपति ने भारत की फॉरेन पॉलिसी के बारे में जो उल्लेख किया है, मुझे गर्व है कि उस फॉरेन पॉलिसी की, उस विदेश नीति की, उस कूटनीति की नींव पंडित नेहरू ने रखी थी और हर प्रधानमंत्री ने उसका निर्वाह किया है। चाहे पंडित नेहरू हो, चाहे इंदिरा जी हो, चाहे राजीव जी हो, चाहे शास्त्री जी हो, चाहे अटल जी हो, हर प्रधानमंत्री ने उसी फॉरेन पॉलिसी का, उसी नीति का, उसी विदेश नीति का निर्वाह किया है जो नॉन अलाइंड थी।
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Joining us on the debate is Guru Prakash, national spokesperson of the BJP, Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, Shubhransh Rai, leader of the Congress, and Dr. Suman C. Raman, political analyst. But I want to come to you first, Mr. Sibal. What do you make of the argument that what we are seeing right now, Mr. Modi's brand of diplomacy, which is being hailed by the likes of Joe Biden, Vladimir Putin, is only a carryover, a continuation of Nehruji's non-aligned movement?
Look, there is always continuity in a country's foreign policy, and a country as serious as India. And we've not had big breaks in our foreign policy over the years. This is a sign of our maturity. So to that extent, whatever argument one makes with regard to the continuity in foreign policy and the contribution that previous prime ministers have made, it may not be wrong. But the thing is that the international situation changes. And then you have to adapt yourself to that situation. At the same time, India's clout has grown internationally hugely since the time of Nehru. And the challenges that we face today as a country which has a voice in international affairs, very prominent voice, and fact that the world has got, again, divided into almost a Cold War-like bloc situation, and the fact that we have great trouble with China on the border, which our external affairs minister keeps repeating regularly. And we are under pressure by the United States to take sides in the Ukraine conflict. All this actually poses a big challenge to our foreign policy, and you need a very nimble and imaginative foreign policy, which actually derives from your strengths and then takes a position where we can manage different pulls and pressures on our foreign policy. And here I think Prime Minister Modi has been remarkably successful. And you just mentioned all the plaudits that we've been receiving from various world leaders. But the plaudit that has come from Russia, since I was ambassador to Russia, so I know a little bit of their mindset and how they've been thinking and dealing with India. There's a sea change from the time that I was there and today. The Russians are looking at India with entirely new eyes. And I was quite surprised at the manner in which Putin elaborated his thinking about India and paid public compliments to India. And mind you, in February, when Prime Minister chaired the UN Security Council meeting when we was presiding over the Security Council, the only foreign head of state who attended that was President Putin. It was a personal gesture that he made to Prime Minister Modi. They have a very good equation at the personal level. Now, Modi, in fact, Prime Minister Putin has actually laid out very clearly what he wants to do with regard to relationship with India. He mentioned how much fertilizer exports to India have increased by 7.2 times. And the fact that he gave the analogy, or not analogy, the metaphor of an icebreaker, that I found rather appealing, because what he intended to convey was that he accepted that the Prime Minister is very motivated by India's national interest. But the metaphor of an icebreaker means that he does not get, he breaks through obstacles and clears pathways for him in order to advance. It is a great appreciation that has come from a strong leader like Putin, who himself is now challenging, as you know, the Western hegemony. Okay. So to conclude, I would say that it was an unexpected compliment. It was a lavish compliment. It was a recognition of India's importance in Russia's calculus going ahead. And the fact that we have also expanding relations with the United States. We are members of, mind you, I must say this before I conclude, he did indirectly also express differences with India's foreign policy options, because on Quad, he had strong language to say that the United States was actually now imposing bloc politics even in Asia. So indirectly, it's not as if he was totally approving of India's foreign policy choices, but the core of that was that Russia now looks at India with entirely new eyes as solid partner.
Okay, opening comments. Suman C. Raman, Russia looking at India through entirely new eyes.
Look, the true test of any friendship is during a time of crisis. And I'm sure many of us will recall that when the United States sent its Navy into the Bay of Bengal in the early 70s, what happened? The Soviets immediately came to our aid. And that was really the friendship being tested in a time of need. Now, India has abstained from voting, I think it is about 10 or 11 times, it could be even more, on UN resolutions which have condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I don't see it as hugely surprising that President Putin would pass these very positive comments.
But despite that, sir, not a single country has come out and condemned India.
Has come in.
The fact that India decided to take a measured stance on Ukraine, and despite that, the United States has actually gone out to compliment India for different reasons, but it has.
You did not interrupt Mr. Sibal, not even once. Interrupt. So I hope that you will allow me to complete my point. Second, the point that Mr. Sibal made, India is playing a much bigger role in international affairs. Its stature has grown. Of course it has grown. And the primary reason why it has grown is because of the economic clout. From the days of liberalization and from the days the economy started to grow significantly over the decades in the 90s, the 2000s and so on, until the slowdown sort of happened, Indian economy is a huge power force today in the world. That is the reason why the stature of India has grown, and the credit for the growth of the economy goes right from the days of Jawaharlal Nehru onwards. You have to give credit to everyone for having grown the economy, and particularly Dr. Manmohan Singh, P.V. Narasimha Rao government that unleashed the forces of liberalization and so on. So I think it is being a little petty to say that this is a praise for any specific gesture. It could very well be.
Okay, it's petty to claim it as the win of any one person. On just a side note though, Dr. Suman C. Raman, you are saying that India is a very hefty economic power right now, because on other issues you say that India is flailing and it's completely in the dumps when it comes to the economy. But anyway, for purposes of diplomacy, you are saying that India enjoys economic clout.
Over the decades.
But if I am not mistaken, Mr. Sibal served as our ambassador post-liberalization to Russia, and he's saying as compared to that time, today India is stronger. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sibal. A quick response from you, and then I'll bring in Guru Prakash.
India has one second.
So we're talking about post-liberalization India, which is when Mr. Sibal says, in comparison, India today is stronger. A quick response from Mr. Sibal, and then I'll bring in Guru Prakash.
I think it is very wrong to try and take away credit from what Mr. Putin said about Prime Minister Modi. He was not giving a historical survey of Russia's relations with India from the time of Soviet Union today, or expressing his thinking about other leaders that he has interacted with. Remember, he became president in the year 2000. And every year we have had summits
on
with
the
leaders.
Ukraine matter.
No, let me just complete. Every year we've had summits with Russia.
India has thrown in its lot with Russia on the Ukraine matter.
But the fact that he has expressed satisfaction with Prime Minister Modi's position on Ukraine, which is one of neutrality. He's not supporting Russia. But the fact he admires that despite all the pressures that the West has been imposing on other countries and other countries have buckled, India has not. And that is why he's expressing appreciation of India's foreign policy.
And by the way, sir, you had India on an international international platform actually telling Russia that their stance of war is wrong. And despite that, a month later, for Putin on a public platform to say that Modi is a patriot and his policies are working would be a win in itself in some eyes. But okay, you can look at it the other way. Guru Prakash, you are petty.
We voted with China, by the way.
Guru Prakash.
Thank you so much. Padmaja, I think, thank you so much, Padmaja. Padmaja, of all of us present here in the panel today, I think no one can claim to have a better understanding of foreign policy than respected Ambassador Kanwal Sibal ji himself. And I was just very carefully listening to what he said, that how our national interest cannot be compromised at any cost. It is a moment of great honor for 1.3 billion Indians. Foreign policy is not a domain of politics. We must be categorical on this. You can claim credit, you can say Nehru ji ka tha. Nehru ji ka credit to aap lete hain, lekin Nehru ji ki galtiyon ko swikar nahi karte hain. It works both ways. It works both ways, that you can only claim credit, but you have to take responsibility for his mistakes as well, for which you don't come forward. Padmaja, one thing which I want to make clear, that in the last 8 years, from the foreign policy, and maybe Ambassador Sibal would agree with me, that pre-2014 or pre-2010, the domain of foreign policy was restricted to a section of anglicized elites based in Delhi. Post-2014, we are seeing a more people-centric foreign policy. You look at India now taking leadership positions at so many levels. International Yoga Day, more than 100 countries at a very short notice, they supported the resolution for International Yoga Day. Look at the vaccine diplomacy. More than 100 countries, India supplied vaccines. You look at Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. India is leading that initiative. There are multiple such initiatives that India is now leading. India is now becoming assertive, aspirational, and a very relevant stakeholder for a rule-based international order. You cannot discount that. More than 10 nations have given their topmost civilian honors like Bharat Ratna to Prime Minister Modi. You cannot take that away. But we have to understand, only yesterday I was reading that Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, which was being discussed by Dr. Raman, that Jawaharlal Nehru made a very compelling remark to the US Ambassador Galbraith, that I am last of the Englishmen to rule India. But for the last 8 years, we are seeing a leader who is rooted in our culture and civilization and asserting India's position without any fear of compromise. Like we saw in the Ukraine crisis as well. Today, India is not going to be bogged down. We are going to articulate our views without any fear or prejudices.
And can I please bring in Shubhransh Rai? You know, you mentioned one important thing, Guru Prakash, which was the vaccine diplomacy. I remember that time last year when the vaccines were being given to our neighboring countries and to others, there was a huge outcry saying that yahan par log mar rahe hain aur vaccine kyun di ja rahi hai. Do you know what the Australian Prime Minister said just last month? He said that vaccines supplied by India to various countries are more valuable than just winning a theoretical debate of ideas, and they have been instrumental in saving lives worldwide. So we have Australia saying thank you for saving lives, and at the same time 219.58 crore Indians have also been vaccinated. Shubhransh Rai. And this is the soft power of diplomacy that has been employed now in the face of criticism and saying that you are killing Indians. 219 करोड़ इंडियंस को वैक्सीन लगाई है और ऑस्ट्रेलिया भी कह रहा है थैंक यू.
मैडम, मैं 22 मिनट सुना हूं, तो प्लीज मुझे थोड़ा सा समय दीजिएगा. मैं आपके 4 वर्ड्स ले रहा हूं: स्टाइल ऑफ डिप्लोमेसी, मोदी ब्रांड, फॉरेन पॉलिसी, पीपल सेंट्रिक पॉलिसी. इन चारों चीजों का रिजल्ट पता है क्या आया है? अमेरिका का वीजा का वेटिंग टाइम 2 साल का है और यूके के वीजा का वेटिंग टाइम 200 दिन प्लस का है. ये आम आदमी को तोहफा दिया गया है भारत सरकार द्वारा. ये आम आदमी की बात चल रही थी, इसलिए थोड़ा जानना जरूरी है. मुझे नहीं मालूम कि कौन कैसा कैसा कहता है, बट द ट्रू स्टोरी इज दिस. नंबर 1. नंबर 2, अभी ना 5 दिन पहले 6 दिन पहले खूब नोएडा मीडिया, इंडियन मीडिया, मोदी मीडिया, भारतीय मूल के प्रधानमंत्री हम खूब जश्न मना रहे थे. नतीजा ये हुआ कि भारतीय मूल के प्रधानमंत्री ने भारतीय मूल के गृह मंत्री को फिर से ब्रिटेन में अपॉइंट किया, सेला ब्रेवरमैन को, जिनके बारे में क्लियर वर्ड है कि सी इज एंटी इंडिया. वो फ्री ट्रेड को उन्होंने कहा नो नो थैंक यू सो मच, इंडिया के साथ नहीं रखना फ्री ट्रेड। अब क्या होगा पता नहीं, लेकिन हमने पिछले 5 दिन पहले खूब ढेर सारा जिंदाबाद जिंदाबाद जय हो सब किया था। तीसरी इंपॉर्टेंट बात, रसिया के लिए मैडम भारत एक मार्केट है। $बिलियन का हथियार हम हर साल खरीदते हैं। रसिया लाला है और हम उसके ग्राहक हैं। और मैं गांव से बिलोंग करता हूं मैडम, ये दिवाली के त्योहार में ना हम सब लोग भी दुकान के आसपास जाते हैं तो जो दुकान पे लाला जी बैठे होते हैं हमसे पता क्या बोलते हैं, अरे मलिकार आइए आइए, मलिकार मलिकार हमें कहते हैं। मैं, मेरे बाप, मेरे दादा के दादा सब लोग खुश हो जाते हैं, सीना चौड़ा हो जाता था, अरे लाला ने हमको मलिकार कहा। उसके बाद कोई उसके हिसाब किताब को नहीं देखता था कि उसने क्या
Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe says that Prime Minister Modi's initiatives such as Make in India, Digital India, Clean India, Smart City are taking India forward. Barack Obama said that like India, Modi transcends the ancient and the modern, a devotee of yoga who connects with Indian citizens on Twitter and imagines a digital India. I quoted to you what the Australian Prime Minister said. चलिए रशिया हमारे लिए मार्केट है, क्या ऑस्ट्रेलिया भी मार्केट है, साउथ कोरिया भी मार्केट है, जापान भी मार्केट है, अमेरिका भी मार्केट है? कोई हमारी बढ़ाई सिर्फ इसलिए कर रहा है क्योंकि वो हमसे पैसे लेना चाहते हैं। इज दैट व्हाट यू आर सेइंग?
अरे अभी थोड़ा 15 सेकंड और प्लीज, 15 सेकंड और प्लीज, हाँ 15 सेकंड और सुनिए। और जब व्यापारी को ये पता हो जाता है, लाला को पता होता है कि जो मेरा ग्राहक है, मैं कोट कर रहा हूं इंडिया और इंडिया के प्राइम मिनिस्टर को, कि उसको अगर तारीफ करने से वो खुश होता है, वो 500 करोड़ का राफेल 1500 करोड़ में खरीद सकता है।
सर आप कितनी बातें कर ली आपने, इतना नहीं बताया कि चलिए रशिया इज डूइंग इट बिकॉज दे वांट टू सेल आर्म्स टू अस, रशिया इज डूइंग इट बिकॉज दे वांट टू सेल आर्म्स टू अस। व्हाई इज जापान प्रेजिंग अस? व्हाई इज ऑस्ट्रेलिया प्रेजिंग अस? व्हाई इज द मिडिल ईस्ट थैंकिंग अस? इवन द मिडिल ईस्ट इज थैंकिंग अस। और बाकी आप छोड़िए, आपने रशिया की बात कर ली, आपने ये नहीं बताया दैट वी आर द ओनली कंट्री, सर सुन लीजिए बिकॉज दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर यू ऑल्सो, इससे जनरल नॉलेज बढ़ती है। डू यू नो दैट वी टुक डिफेंस सिस्टम S-400 Triumph from Russia, and after that America actually gave us a waiver from CATSA. कोई और अगर देश रशिया से ऐसे आर्म सिस्टम्स खरीदे तो उनके खिलाफ सैंक्शंस लगते हैं। इंडिया को ये एक वन टाइम वेवर दिया गया कैट्सा से। अब ये अमेरिका क्यों कर रहा है? क्यों? अमेरिका भी हमारे लिए मार्केट है इसलिए।
वो समझे नहीं, वो भी अरे मैडम वो भी चाह रहा है कि आप उसके हथियार खरीदो। वही अमेरिका है जिसके वाइस प्रेसिडेंट भारतीय मूल की कमला हैरिस हमारे मोदी जी से नहीं मिलती है, क्योंकि अब की बात
क्या मतलब है? मैं आपको बता रही हूँ व्हाट आर द हार्ड रियलिटीज ऑन द ग्राउंड सर, व्हाट आर द हार्ड टेकअवेज, द डिलीवरेबल्स, एंड द डिलीवरेबल्स आर दैट वी आर द वन कंट्री व्हिच कैन अफोर्ड टू टेक अ मेजर्ड स्टैंड विज़-विज़ यूक्रेन एंड रशिया। वी आर द वन कंट्री व्हिच कैन डू आर्म्स Russia and still not be sanctioned with America. We are the one country which can vaccinate its people and still be thanked by all other countries who we are giving vaccines to. But you will not see any merit in it. You will say कि हर कोई अपने मतलब से कर रहा है। गुरु प्रकाश रिस्पॉन्ड। वीजा की इतनी लंबी लाइन है।
Padmaja, I was patiently listening to the previous speaker and what we intend to say with people-centric foreign policy. पीपल सेंट्रिक फॉरेन पॉलिसी का मैं अर्थ समझाना चाहता हूं मेरे साथी को। यूक्रेन में जब लड़ाई हो रही थी 20,000 से अधिक बच्चों को इवैक्यूएट किया गया। मोर देन 20,000 स्टूडेंट्स वर इवैक्यूएटेड। जरा जा करके उन बच्चों के पेरेंट्स से पूछिएगा कि पीपल सेंट्रिक फॉरेन पॉलिसी का मतलब क्या होता है।
सब लाखों रुपए में टिकट खरीद के आए थे।
मैं बीच में नहीं बोल रहा था। मैं पद्मजा मैं नहीं, पद्मजा जी ये
अब हम आपको फिर दोबारा बताने लगेंगे कैसे उनके लिए फ्लाइट्स गई थी। प्लीज लेट्स टॉक ऑन फैक्ट्स शुभ्रान जी। मैं आपको डिफेंस सिस्टम के बारे में बता रही हूँ, आप वीजा की लाइन के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं। प्लीज लेट्स हैव वन एट अ टाइम। लेट हिम फिनिश हिज पॉइंट इन 30 सेकंड्स, देन यू रिस्पॉन्ड। गुरु प्रकाश।
पद्मजा नहीं, ये कुछ लोगों के संस्कार होते हैं, वो बीच बीच में डिस्टर्ब करते हैं। जब तर्क और तथ्य नहीं होते तो डिस्टर्ब करते हैं। सब सुनने का धैर्य रखिएगा सर। हाँ, 22,000 छात्रों के माता पिता से पूछिएगा कि यूक्रेन में वॉर लाइक सिचुएशन से निकालने का मतलब पीपल सेंट्रिक फॉरेन पॉलिसी होता है? जरा पूछ के आइएगा। भारत के 130 करोड़ लोगों का सीना चौड़ा होता है जब इंटरनेशनल योगा डे पूरे दुनिया भर में मनाया जाता है। यमन हो, अफगानिस्तान हो, वॉर लाइक सिचुएशन, क्राइसिस लाइक सिचुएशन से क्यों निकाला गया है? आप पूछ करके आइएगा। लगातार वैक्सीन डिप्लोमेसी हो, मैकेंजी बोलता है मैकेंजी गलत बोल रहा है, कोई हेड ऑफ स्टेट बोलता है गलत बोल रहा है। आपसे ही बोल रहे हैं क्या? मैकेंजी ने कहा है दिस इज नॉट ओनली इंडियाज डेकेड बट दिस इज गोइंग टू बी इंडिया सेंचुरी। ये भारत का दशक नहीं, आने वाले 100 साल भारत के होने वाले हैं। आपको समझना चाहिए। आज IMF हो, वर्ल्ड बैंक हो, आज सबके सब भारत की अगर तारीफ करते हैं तो स्वीकार करना चाहिए। आप फॉरेन पॉलिसी का मतलब ये नहीं है कि एंग्लिसाइज्ड एलिट्स हो। एंग्लिसाइज्ड एलिट से बाहर निकलना फॉरेन पॉलिसी का डोमेन है। आपको देख करके आना चाहिए। फॉरेन पॉलिसी पीपल सेंट्रिक फॉरेन पॉलिसी है। ये दिल्ली के कुछ लोगों तक सीमिटेड नहीं रह गया है। आपको समझना चाहिए।
Are you making a reference to the first Prime Minister of India, Guru Prakash, when you say anglicized elites?
1 second.
Or the Congress government? What do you mean by anglicized elites?
He himself said that Padmaja, it was Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru who said that I am last of the Englishmen to rule India. I am last of the Englishmen to rule India. This is what Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru said to Ambassador Gabriel.
Okay, so from anglicized elites, Dr. Sumansi Raman, we have come to a Bharatiya model of diplomacy where even the Russian president says that Modi is the only one capable of independent foreign policy and the future belongs to India.
Focused foreign policy.
Padmaja, I want to remind me. I remember somebody just saying, I think it was hardly a week ago, that we must get rid of this colonial mindset and the idea of constantly seeking approval from the white man. Now here we go saying Australian Prime Minister said that, Japanese Prime Minister said that, UK Prime Minister said that, American President said that. I mean, at the end of the day, it has got to result either in enhanced security for the country or ease of access for the citizens of the country. Right now, it takes a year to get an interview for a visa to go to the US.
The fact that you could have a 4-hour ceasefire to evacuate your citizens, the fact that you are getting arms from Russia and not yet being sanctioned by the United States, these are the real deliverables. Nobody is seeking validation. The validation, sir, happens once every 5 years. That is the brown man's validation that is needed. That is the only validation the country needs. But these are real deliverables.
Padmaja, and how many lakhs of people were evacuated? Lakhs of people were evacuated during the Gulf War. Have you heard of it?
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Sibal again. You spoke very specifically, sir, of your time in Russia and now. Can you explain 2 major departures from your time and now? From 20 years ago to 2022.
Well, one major departure is that Russia was not at all looking at India, despite all the years of our friendship, as, if I may say, as an equal. There was a degree of patronization that Russia could give a lot to India, but India was not in a position to actually return in full measure what Russia might expect. Now, I'm saying this because the feeling was that India was far too immersed with its domestic issues and was not in a position to play an active role on the international stage. But today is very different. There is definitely a sense of equality. Putin, in fact, in his speech, when he spoke about the giants of Asia, he mentioned India and China. He talked about India's growth rates. So now they understand that India is a very valuable partner, and even more valuable now that Russia is confronting the West. So they need countries like India and China in Africa and Latin America to actually, in a sense, give ballast to Russia's foreign policy objectives of multipolarity. And India is very, very crucial in this regard. So to answer your question, yes, there is a change in mindset of Russia towards India. Russia wants to have more trade with India. It's willing to sell more oil to India. They know that their position as an arms supplier has got diluted with India diversifying its trade, but they're not holding it against us.
Is it only because Russia wants our money? Because the accusation is it's only because they want our money.
The whole world has sanctioned
This is what I'm saying, that actually if they wanted to look at India in this way, they could be unhappy with us. that our sales or purchase of arms from Russia is declining over the years, and we have bought $20 billion from United States, which today treats Russia as its adversary. But they're not holding it against us. They're very realistic. They're very pragmatic. And they want to actually help India in terms of setting up defense manufacturing at home, just as other countries are doing. So It is a very different equation today. And we should be proud of this. Actually, all of us should applaud the fact that Russia is appreciating India's leadership in this very difficult international situation on Ukraine, rather than get involved in this party politics that, no, if Russia gives credit to Modi, he must give credit to previous prime ministers. That's a false debate. It's not really the point which we are discussing. At this moment, we are discussing about India's stature, Modi's contribution to it, change India-Russia relations, India's ability to manage contradictions in foreign policy, having very good relationship with the United States, with Europe, as well as with Russia. So, and I'll end with this has enabled us to actually credibly hold the G20 meeting. If we had taken any sides in this matter, I can tell you the G20 meeting would have been a failure.
And today, if Russia is looking at India as an equal, it also means that every Indian is seen as an equal, whether in our country or without. And very, very important point being made there by Ambassador Sibal about this entire bogey of how Russia is reaching out to us only because they want our money in return of arms. Actually, over the last few years, India has made a calculated decision to reduce our dependency and move towards Make in India in our defense acquisition. I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much, all gentlemen, for joining us with your wisdom. Thanks for watching.
The News Hour at 10 will be right back after the break.